Yes, it's the biggest of them all.
If I had have acted in the way that they have acted, I think I would be in jail.
Carving up Australia's food.
It will come as a surprise to a lot of viewers that a company linked to so many scandals has been allowed to come into Australia.
You have to ask, what is going on? Why is that company so supported by our politicians?
I would not trust them anywhere. Be wary in Australia.
Four Corners, Monday, ABC TV and ABC iView.
I've covered more than 80 elections for the ABC over the last 3 decades.
Doesn't get better than Anthony Green, one of my favourite colleagues.
Anthony Green is extraordinary. I've never seen anyone like him.
He is absolutely unbelievable.
His capacity to understand numbers as they're coming in and explain them.
All of the politicians, from Prime Minister to Opposition Leader, waits for Anthony Green to call it. An amazing asset to our election coverage.
And I'm quite happy to continue to do it for a few more years yet.
Broom's pearl diving past is brought to life.
So this is you.
In magical miniature.
Hi.
It's a big mini build, needing fine skills and know-how.
3 days work.
And a little help from hosts Joanne.
Can you tell me what Broom was like? Excesses of everything.
And Jimmy.
Well, it is a bowl.
Pack your bags for Tiny Oz.
Let's go searching for pearls.
Tuesday 8:30 on ABC TV and streaming on ABC iView.
The election campaign looks further abroad with tough questions on national security and the Solomon Islands. Ukraine warns Russia's new strategy puts other nations in the firing line. New South Wales to make big changes to close contact rules in schools. And a silver lining to Melbourne's lockdown, a potential defence against premature births. Good evening and a warm welcome to ABC News. I'm Mariam Saab. Federal Labor is accusing the coalition of trying to deflect from its own foreign policy failures by dredging up old speeches from Deputy Opposition Leader Richard Marles and twisting the meaning for political gain. The controversial security pact between China and Solomon Islands continues to dominate the election campaign, with the federal government facing ongoing criticism it was complacent about Beijing's growing influence in the South Pacific. From Canberra, here's political reporter Matthew Doran.
Lena, nice to meet you.
Winning over the public can require a bit of bait.
And is that just a marketing gimmick or does that work?
Scott Morrison hoping to lure more Australians to vote for the coalition in 4 weeks' time, with $20 million to upgrade boat ramps and campsites across the country.
There we go. Not too bad.
Although he wasn't keen to be on the hook for any questions on the pledge. Or anything else for that matter.
Why won't you talk to us about national security?
Leaving it to the rest of his crew to launch into another day of drilling down on the Deputy Labor leader's record.
Done under pressure.
His startling comments and approach to China show a real national security concern should the Labor Party be elected.
The assertion that's being made by the government is just another desperate attempt to divert from their failings in the Pacific.
The coalition is accusing Richard Marles of sharing an advance copy of a speech to a Beijing-based university with the Chinese embassy in Canberra back in 2019.
A speech in which he said that he would encourage China's engagement in the Pacific.
There were no changes whatsoever made to a speech that I made in China criticising China in public. Now, what government minister has done that?
The attacks against Mr Marles aren't new.
We got another Manchurian candidate.
But with Anthony Albanese on day 2 of COVID-19 isolation, with only a furry friend for company, the coalition's focus is firmly on his understudy.
We've got a 50-year-old apprentice at the moment.
Yeah.
You know.
As it tries to deflect criticism, it let China muscle in on Australia's turf, signing a security pact with Solomon Islands.
What we're seeing at present is a high level of hypocrisy from the Labor Party.
Under their watch, they have let the Pacific go.
The coalition spruiks its national security and foreign policy credentials at every turn, even though China's sortie in the Solomons does point to a failure in that strategic wrestle with Beijing. The opposition will be hoping to exploit that in coming weeks, and it's indicating it will boost foreign aid spending in a bid to counter China's growing regional influence if the ALP win office. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Canberra.
And the United States has warned against allowing a Chinese military base in Solomon Islands, promising to fast-track reopening its embassy in Honiara. The US embassy was shut down there nearly 30 years ago. Former acting US ambassador to Australia, James Caruso, says it was a mistake to close it in the first place.
You can't treat a country with neglect or outsource your relationship, certainly not if you want to be an influence in the region without having presence on the ground. So yeah, that was I think a mistake for the United States over a long time.
The US says it would respond accordingly if China made any moves to establish a military base in Solomon Islands. Australia says it welcomes the renewed US engagement in the Pacific. Ukraine's president claims Russia has plans to invade neighbouring countries, saying the assault on his nation is just the beginning. It follows comments from a top Russian commander revealing plans to take full control of east and southern Ukraine and a breakaway region in Moldova. New pictures have also emerged showing what life has been like inside the last stronghold in the besieged city of Mariupol. Our correspondent Nick Dole reports from Lviv.
The UN says this war tells a horror story of violations against civilians. Russia has pounded the key port city of Mariupol with cataclysmic force. Vladimir Putin calls it liberation. But this group of women and children are trapped underground. Video shared by the far-right Azov battalion shows for the first time what life is like for some civilians hiding in the besieged steelworks. I hope we can see the sun, this boy says. We've been here for 2 months.
Even wars have rules, and these need to be respected. Otherwise, we are very afraid of what could come next.
A Russian commander has now given the first detailed insight into what that might be, revealing Vladimir Putin wants full control of southern Ukraine and the Donbass. That would give troops better access to annexed Crimea and this Russian-backed separatist area in neighbouring Moldova. Ukraine's president claims it proves Putin has ambitions beyond his country's borders.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine was intended only as a beginning. Then they want to capture other countries.
But the immediate concern is in the parts of Ukraine where civilians are deliberately being targeted.
This is a terrible life. I need to leave, but where? I was hoping it would be okay here. Hope dies last.
In the city of Kharkiv, volunteers are working against the clock to sew soldiers' flak jackets.
It would be good to have had everything done yesterday, or even better if it was all done last week.
We should be certain that if the West doesn't continue to support Ukraine, the Russians have a much greater chance of rolling over the country and installing a puppet regime.
In the forests outside the capital, Ukraine's young defenders, like law student Vlad Nekrotenko, are readying for that possibility.
Let's say we lose our positions on Donbass or Lugansk region, and then they see that we don't have enough troops and resources to protect Kyiv. They would come back for their initial aim to take over our capital and take over our government.
While some churches here are boarded up, many Ukrainians will still be trying to celebrate Orthodox Easter this weekend, 58 days into a war that British intelligence warns could last at least another year.
We hope for a resurrection. We believe in the victory of life over death.
A country clinging on to its right to exist. Nick Dole, ABC News, Lviv.
Ukrainians across the world are marking Orthodox Easter this weekend as their country struggles under the pall of the Russian conflict. In Australia, a determined band of protesters is keeping up the pressure on the Russian embassy in Canberra, urging the government to close it. For the faithful, it's a particularly stressful time as they contemplate the future for their families back in Ukraine.
For Ukrainian Orthodox Christians, it's the holiest of times. They've been preparing all week with their special eggs and Easter baskets to celebrate the rising of Christ. Father Michael Solomko says it's a time of hope and forgiveness.
We should be reflecting
and being peaceful, and certainly being mindful of the great commandments of not to kill and not to covet anything of thy neighbours.
This year's Easter is particularly difficult, with many praying simply for the survival of family in Ukraine.
For them to be safe. I want my cousin to be safe.
I've got cousins in Kiev. I speak to them daily to make sure they're still alive. That's why I'm here. They actually asked me to light candles for them because they've been told it's not safe to go to church.
The Russian bombing in Ukraine has not spared the country's places of worship in all denominations, making this Easter one never to forget for all Ukrainian Christians. On the other side of the world, Australia's Ukrainian community is mourning those lost, particularly the children. And the community has kept up a protest outside the Russian embassy since the invasion began. Today, they called for the government to shut the embassy.
Oh, I would love it. I think that would be a very sensible way to let them know that they need to change their behaviour to be part of the world.
People want to get the message across to the people at the embassy that what the Russian Federation is doing during Great Lent, considering they call themselves Orthodox Christians, is just wrong.
In the meantime, all anyone can do is pray for peace. Elizabeth Byrne, ABC News, Canberra.
Turning to the coronavirus situation, students and teachers in New South Wales who were close contacts of positive COVID cases will be allowed into classrooms when Term 2 begins next week. Now, the policy is in line with the state government's decision to scrap isolation requirements for close contacts. That came into effect yesterday. If they become a close contact, teachers and students will be required to advise their school, take daily rapid antigen tests and also wear a mask indoors. Now, schools will be given more free rapid tests soon after students return. One of WA Premier Mark McGowan's children has been discharged from hospital after becoming unwell with COVID. The child is fully vaccinated, but the Premier's office confirmed on Friday they'd become so sick they needed to be taken to hospital. Mr McGowan also tested positive to COVID and remains in isolation. Late this afternoon, the Premier's office released a statement saying his child was recovering at home and thanked hospital and staff for their care. Earlier, the Deputy Premier Roger Cook said he hoped both family members had a speedy recovery.
We ask everyone to respect their privacy and we wish them all the very best as they go through this difficult phase.
Prime Minister Scott Morrison and Opposition Leader Anthony Albanese also sent their messages of support. Meanwhile, WA recorded a slight drop in new cases of COVID. 248 people are in hospital, 7 people in intensive care. One historical death was recorded, a woman in her 80s who died earlier this month. Researchers in Melbourne say the city's lockdown appeared to have reduced the risk of premature birth. Doctors have discovered a big drop in birth rates during some periods of the pandemic and an even bigger drop in babies being born early. Well, now they're looking at how the findings could help prevent more premature births. Nicole Asher reports.
15-month-old Mason Connolly is on the move, to the delight of his sisters. He arrived 2 months early, tiny and with lungs barely able to keep him alive.
Once he was into NICU and we had 5 months we lived through 3 lockdowns in NICU, which was challenging because only my husband and I could be with him.
At that time, early last year, the rate of premature births in Melbourne had come right down.
We saw a drop in preterm births during the start of lockdowns, which carried on once the lockdown finished as well.
Associate Professor Atul Malhotra works with the sickest kids in the Monash Children's Hospital's neonatal intensive care unit. His research looked at 38,000 births.
At the peak of the pandemic, we saw a drop of almost 15 births per week.
We were very, very busy around that time, but it was nice to have slightly few people come through our clinics.
But it's the bigger drop in premature births that has the doctors most interested. They believe the isolation and slower-paced lifestyle probably helped some women carry their babies for longer.
people were going out less, they were interacting less. Maybe there's less number of viruses overall in the community.
The researchers are now planning a trial with expectant mothers who've had premature babies in the past. They'll be asked to live under lockdown-like conditions for 6 weeks to see if that reduces the number of babies arriving early.
It's potentially a game changer because obviously, we don't have currently any specific treatments for preventing preterm birth.
Having spoken to lots of women who've had previous preterm births, they'll do anything they can to try and safeguard their pregnancy.
For Briley Conley, that rings true.
You do what you need to do to protect your baby and you just want to have a healthy baby. I think if it didn't create a lot of extra undue stress and unnecessary stress, I think I'd probably do it.
All with the aim of giving kids like Mason more time to grow. Nicole Asher, ABC News, Melbourne.
The Northern Territory government is under scrutiny over its handling of a tender process involving fracking research in the Beetaloo Basin. The anti-corruption watchdog has been asked to investigate a government contract where local researchers were bypassed in favour of an interstate team at higher cost to taxpayers.
It might look like bare scrubland, with gas companies primed and ready to frack. But before that can happen, researchers are working out what plants and animals call the Beetaloo Basin home.
We need to get this science together so we can do an analysis of what the risks of fracking are to groundwater.
Already, these unique tiny creatures have been found in an aquifer underground, discovered last year by researchers from Charles Darwin University and the CSIRO. Those researchers thought they were the logical pick to undertake key baseline studies into the Stygofauna. The NT government instead chose a West Australian company to do the work. That decision has come under the scrutiny of buy local advocate Dennis Steadman, a man appointed by the government to support local industry. He says the CDU researchers had signed a draft contract with the government, only to have the job cancelled at the last minute and awarded to someone from outside the NT at twice the price. He says one CDU scientist suspects the decision could relate to media coverage of other research, which did not support the NT government's position on fracking. He's referred the matter to the Northern Territory's Anti-Corruption Commissioner due to his concern about potential unsatisfactory conduct, including the inappropriate or inefficient use of public resources.
We've seen quite a bit of what you can only describe as political interference in the process around the science of the Shreeba, and this example of it was pretty extreme.
The Environment Department and the Anti-Corruption Watchdog both declined to comment on the matter now that it's been referred to ICAC. Samantha Dick, ABC News.
2 little girls with a rare genetic brain disorder are taking part in groundbreaking Queensland research to find a cure. From different parts of the globe, Sunshine Coast toddler Tallulah Moon and Singaporean Alyssa Lim normally would have never met. But in the hope of finding a drug treatment, they've linked up in Brisbane for a world-first trial using their stem cells.
This looks like an ordinary play date. 2 little girls having fun.
You're helping. You're helping.
But it's a life-changing meeting. Tiny Alyssa Lim has come from Singapore to meet up with 3-year-old Tallulah Moon to find a cure for a rare form of hereditary spastic paraplegia. It's a 1 in a million chance mutation that affects their ability to walk or talk, caused by the faulty gene SPG56.
I can't explain how lonely we felt when we were told that Tallulah was the only diagnosis in Australia.
What we are only hearing from doctors is that it's incurable, so that's why we feel even more alone.
But they are daring to dream and have put their faith in former Australian of the Year, Professor Alan Mackay-Sim, whose stem cell research helped a paraplegic in Poland walk again.
In the fairyland sense, we'd love to be able to reverse it. If we stopped the effect of the mutation early, we might be able to have their normal development progress.
Using nasal stem cells, researchers from Griffith University have already found a drug used in cough medicine to treat a more common type of the disease. Now they're taking a stab in the dark to crack this case.
Researchers say there are as many drugs in the world as there are stars in the universe, but they've managed to narrow it down to 3,000 that are already approved for use and could unlock the key to this genetic mystery.
The medical pathway for a cure comes down to the girls' mutated cells and how they respond to a class of drugs.
We're seeing if with those drugs we can modify that abnormal cell to become more like a normal cell.
Both girls were diagnosed before their second birthdays.
She's certainly a very special kid that we wouldn't change for anything.
Tallulah's parents have raised $500,000 to help fund this research.
I want Tallulah to live a long and happy life.
Just to say, Mum, Dad, just to call us by name.
It's a race against time.
You say, hiya!
Hi. Lexi Hamilton-Smith, ABC News.
In recent years, Anzac Day has brought extra recognition for the sacrifice of Indigenous Australians, particularly at a time they face significant discrimination. For one Melbourne family, the surprise discovery of an old war medal in an Adelaide shed has also brought home more truths about their ancestors' brave service.
Hello. Mark Howard and his wife Heather have come to Melbourne with a special delivery. They're meeting Kevin Coombs to return a World War I medal belonging to his grandfather, Alfred Jack Coombs.
Oh, look at that.
The British War Medal had been lost to the Coombs family for a century. Mark Howard found it in a locked box belonging to his father.
I got the idea that I had to find out who the medal belonged to and possibly, if I could, return it.
Cleaning and examining the medal revealed a name and service number. Then the realisation the medal came from an Indigenous soldier. Jack Coombs and his brother enlisted in 1916 and were both wounded on the Western Front. Further research showed Mark the extent of discrimination suffered by Aboriginal men when they returned to Australia.
No recognition, no block of land, no soldier settlement, no pension. I just want to do the right thing.
When you're at war and you're as good as anyone as your mate, but when the war's over, you come back and you're just another Aboriginal.
Jack Coombs' grandson Kevin is Australia's first Indigenous Paralympian, awarded an OAM for his achievements in wheelchair basketball. But even he faced discrimination as Aboriginal people were not considered full citizens.
I went away on an honorary British passport to represent my country. So that was pretty shameful. That's Jack there.
Yep.
The return of the medal has revived another chapter in the Coombs family's distinguished history.
We were just blown away, the whole family just blown away.
Oh, it felt fantastic. Yeah, it was like we completed the story of a medal 100 years lost.
A past that was locked away, now returned and honoured. Eric Twarchek, ABC News.
The Adelaide Crows have recorded back-to-back victories in the AFL, holding on by 1 point against the Western Bulldogs in a Ballarat thriller. Taylor Walker was the hero again for the Crows with 3 goals, his third from the boundary, securing the points late in the final term.
Pushed right to the end, Adelaide stunned last year's grand finalists in windy Ballarat.
Siren sounds. Brilliant win by the Crows.
Adelaide's forward pressure was on show early with the first 2 goals of the game. Jordan Dawson seizing the momentum, soaring highest for this grab.
Long kick towards the wings. Dawson! Massive grab!
But the Bulldogs bit back with the next 3 goals of the term to hit the front. In a scrappy second quarter, neither side could take a hold of the game. Taylor Walker kicking the only major.
Class and experience from Tex there, and he's up to 499 career.
Shane McAdam had his second after winning this one-on-one contest, as Adelaide dominated inside 50s with the breeze. Josh Shackey ensuring the margin was just 3 points at the final change.
Total off for Shackey. How's the wow factor of that?
Walker found space again early in the fourth, becoming just the 61st player to kick 500 goals.
And he works that back like a work of art, what the craftsman he is.
Before Adam Treloar dribbled his way through to keep the Dogs in the game. Both sides traded majors as the match finally opened up, and it was the Bulldogs getting on top.
Dogs with a crumb! Dogs are in front!
But Walker's third goal ensured the points for the Crows.
Their all-time greatest goal kicker, Taylor Walker, with a work of art!
A late Marcus Bontempelli snap made for a nervous finale, but Adelaide held on, winning back-to-back games for the first time since April last year. Cameron Slesser, ABC News.
The Fijiana Ndrua have completed an undefeated Super W Championship, beating New South Wales in this afternoon's thrilling grand final in Melbourne. And the Chiefs have taken the first scalp of Super Rugby Pacific's Super Round, scoring 6 tries to 3 to beat the Waratahs last night.
The Ndrua women had already handed New South Wales their first ever loss in the Super W competition this season. And at 17-5 after half an hour, it looked like the grand final was going to be all one way.
That is special to watch.
But the Waratahs weren't giving up a fourth straight grand final easily.
And Delamere is over for a hat-trick. That's 3 for the Tars hooker. And we're all square.
The sides traded tries over the last 25 minutes, with the Waratahs even regaining the lead.
Now Kapani breaks away.
But the Ndrua hit back the only way they know how. 2 scintillating tries in 5 minutes to secure an incredible unbeaten season.
Is that the title?
The thrilling win capping off an emotional campaign for the new champions in their debut season.
I mean, today is, like I've said, I've lost the words. It's just been incredible.
Last night, the Waratahs were on the back foot from the 3rd minute, with prop Angus Bell sent off for a lifting tackle. The Chiefs forwards wasted no time in taking advantage, and with the Tars down a second man, they pounced again. Jake Gordon finished off nicely to put his side on the board, but Quinn Tupaia crossed for his second and a handy Chiefs first half lead. New South Wales scored either side of half-time, Gordon's second bringing them back to within 3 points. But it was all the Chiefs from there. Winger Jonah Lowe crossed 3 times in the last 23 minutes to finish with 4 for the night.
Lowe looking for his third.
The Chiefs with the first win of the Super Round, 51 points to 27. Brett McKay, ABC News.
On the satellite picture, an area of mid-level cloud extends across much of Queensland. This area of instability is associated with a low over the tip of the Cape York Peninsula and a surface trough extending south from the low to western New South Wales. Troughs are generating heavy rain in North Queensland, leading to flooding. Cooler onshore winds along the east coast are bringing showers. Looking around the country for tomorrow next, in Queensland, showers for the east and northwest of the state. In New South Wales and the ACT, showers in the northeast and mostly sunny and cool conditions elsewhere. Mostly sunny and cool temperatures right across Victoria. In Tasmania, clearing showers in the southwest, mostly sunny, mild conditions elsewhere. Mostly sunny in the southeast of South Australia and showers in the central and northern parts. Mostly sunny and warm conditions across Western Australia. Mostly sunny in the Northern Territory's top end and showers and storms expected elsewhere. Looking ahead to Monday's forecast for our capital cities, a possible shower for Brisbane and Sydney. Mostly cloudy in Canberra, Melbourne, Hobart and Adelaide. Late shower for Perth and mostly sunny in Darwin with a top of 34. And that's the latest from ABC News. Keep up to date with us at news.abc.net.au and on ABC iView. I'm Mariam Saab. Stay with us for ABC News Regional up next.
Police say Mr. Justice Opaz was shot with a .22 calibre weapon.
The Parramatta blast shattered brickwork in the forecourt of the empty family court building.
Who premeditated and pre-planned the crimes.
this series of crimes is unparalleled in Australian history.
Len turned around and said, I can shoot you anytime I want to.
The Family Court Murders starts Tuesday, May 10 on ABC TV and ABC iView.
After the last 2 years, we could all do with a bit of a boost. And a COVID-19 booster, it boosts more than just your immunity.
It's a boost to my bottom line.
A boost to my confidence.
Boost to my fitness.
A boost to our social life.
A boost to my happiness.
Give yourself a boost and keep up to date with your vaccinations by visiting australia.gov.au. Authorised by the Australian Government, Canberra.
Snap, we got to stop running the business out the back of my van.
Not sustainable. I've sustained you so far.
We're on the edge of being a proper business.
We could be talking about the waves.
What are you doing?
We're selling an idea of summers that never end.
When I'm out there, just me and the ocean.
Trace and I, we're building a future. The company is called Lightwave, and we're making board shorts.
What about loyalty? What about friendship?
Well, this is war.
Don't worry, it's okay.
Lightwave shorts.
I'll be coming home to see you today.
Lightwave victory.
The Bedford is my company.
Snap is building an empire.
Wait, this isn't what I came for.
Show them who you really are.
I'm coming home, I'm coming home, I'm coming home to you tonight.
When did all this stop being fun?
Barron's starts tomorrow on ABC or log into ABC iView.
Australia's political leaders hit the hustings to fight for votes in key regional seats. Acid-spitting crazy ants wreak havoc as they march south from Queensland's far north. And a problem comes home to roost for egg farmers. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Alexandra Alvaro with a look at some of the stories making headlines in regional and rural Australia. Week 2 of the federal election campaign is wrapping up, with Scott Morrison and Anthony Albanese making trips to regional Australia, where several key seats are up for grabs. To take us through the key issues, here's national rural reporter Kath Sullivan.
There were farms, factories, aged care homes and airports. The federal leaders were out and about crisscrossing the country this week, trying to win votes ahead of next month's federal election. But when it comes to the rural sector, all eyes were on Canberra, where the Agriculture Minister and Shadow went toe-to-toe in a debate at the National Rural Press Club. The Coalition's David Littleproud used the forum to commit $75 million to help first-time farm buyers break into the market. It's not new money, rather reappropriated from the Regional Investment Corporation. Labor's Julie Collins says she'll see the details before she decides whether Labor would back the policy. She's yet to announce an agriculture-specific policy in her time in the portfolio and remains tight-lipped about the opposition's plans for the live sheep export sector. At the last federal election, Labor committed to phase out the trade over 5 years. The two agriculture leaders were also at odds over delays to the new agriculture visa. Industry groups have been warned not to expect any foreign workers to arrive in Australia on the agriculture visa until tax legislation passes the Parliament. Neither party was willing to admit why that hasn't happened yet. With just 4 weeks to go until polling day, you can expect to hear a lot more from each of the political parties and what they'll do for regional Australia.
The New South Wales state government is setting up a new corporation to oversee rebuilding in the flood-ravaged region in what's being called a turning point for the Northern Rivers. It's hoped the corporation will cut through red tape and fast-track the reconstruction process.
7 weeks on and Lismore is still showing the signs of the worst flood in its recorded history. Many buildings are taped off or boarded up. Food often comes from pop-up stalls, and locals like Tim Carlisle are living in vans.
Luckily I have a bed, I have a shower, I have a fridge, I have a little washing machine, a little twin tub so I can wash my clothes. So I'm one of the lucky few.
The clean-up is almost over for many, but the path to rebuilding, renovating or relocating will be a long one. The state government has announced a new body to oversee the process.
This is not just about building back better or stronger, it's making sure we protect people well into the future.
The creation of the Northern Rivers Reconstruction Corporation has received bipartisan support. Labor's Lismore MP Janelle Saffin says it's a turning point for the region.
To have one single body that could do the cut-through that's required, but importantly, demonstrate a response to the magnitude of what happened here.
The government says it will have the power to fast-track buildings and acquire or subdivide land.
We'll await the outcomes of the flood inquiry and then work with the community around that. So I certainly wouldn't be alarmed by it at all, but it may well be an appropriate solution in some circumstances.
The compulsory acquisition of land could see the government buy back properties in areas it deems too risky to rebuild in. That might seem attractive to some people who have been swamped by 2 major floods in as many months. But some will also be wondering how much they might be paid for a property on the floodplain.
They're obviously not going to give us a block up on the hill, are they? That's worth $200,000 a block when our block's worth not even $20,000.
A fresh start for a new corporation with plenty of work to do. Bruce Mackenzie, ABC News, Lismore.
After spending several years with potentially toxic drinking water, a small town in the Northern Territory may finally have a solution in sight. Australia's largest water treatment plant will soon be switched on with the sole purpose of removing PFAS chemicals from the town's supply. But fears have been raised that the problem could be more widespread than first thought. Roxanne Fitzgerald reports.
Unsafe and potentially toxic. Contaminated water in this Northern Territory town has cast a shadow for years.
This is going to be the largest emerging water contaminant and possibly food chain contaminant we've ever seen here, Australia, and around the globe.
For more than a decade, PFAS chemicals from firefighter training leached into Catherine's water supply. The contamination forced a landmark class action and promises of remediation. But world-renowned activist Erin Brockovich warns the toxic leak isn't isolated to the town.
It is widespread. It is dangerous. It's in the water. It can get into the food supply chain, which we are clearly seeing happening here in the United States.
And the experts agree.
It wasn't really on people's radars as a contaminant for so long. We're now seeing that it has gotten out into the environment. The more we look, the more we're finding.
PFAS is a problem around Australia in a multitude of places.
2 years after the landmark settlement saw more than $90 million awarded to residents in Katherine over PFAS contamination, a solution to remove the forever chemicals is finally nearing completion, in the form of a $24 million filtration system that makes potentially toxic water safe to drink.
It is like a magnet to the PFAS. So as that water goes through, it captures the PFAS, removes it from the water stream.
The facility is one of the first for Australia, but around the globe, water concerns mean the systems are becoming more common.
I think that will be what all of us are going to see in the future is massive filtration systems. We're already seeing it here in the United States on our municipalities.
The facility here in Katherine should be switched on by August, but for many residents, concerns over lingering health issues are far from over. And unlike other countries, the Australian government has not yet found any evidence of significant harmful impacts. Roxanne Fitzgerald, ABC News, Katherine.
While much of Australia has adjusted to living with COVID-19, it's only now starting to sweep through some remote areas of Western Australia. Its emergence has exposed dangerous overcrowding and chronic homelessness, with hundreds of Aboriginal people having to be relocated to hotels to isolate. Erin Park reports.
We've come to the Kimberley town of Derby, where people with COVID-19 are being brought into town to a budget motel.
Hello, Karen. Hi. We've got to stay back here, so I'll just give you a call.
Karen Sebastian has been bused 200 kilometres from her hometown of Broome to isolate with her teenage sons.
Well, obviously it was no
accommodation in Broome for COVID patients.
After 18 months planning for the return of COVID-19 to the Kimberley, the ABC has confirmed the WA government's response is using tourist hotels to isolate vulnerable and contagious people. Some because their homes are too overcrowded to isolate safely. Others, like Karen and her kids, don't have a home at all.
Me and my kids have just been going all over the place, squatting everywhere, staying at people's houses, then moving on, just keep moving on.
The family tested positive at Broome Hospital in early April.
So we had to go and sleep on the streets while me and my daughter-in-law had COVID until the next day when they got a phone call Wednesday morning saying to go back to the hospital and they're going to transfer us here.
Well, the use of these hotels has provided a short-term fix during the COVID pandemic. Community leaders say the whole situation has highlighted the scale of the problem with a lack of housing and overcrowding in Northern Australia. At the outskirts of Derby, we stop at the turn-off to the Mowanjum community, where about 70 of the 400 residents are thought to have COVID.
One of the very first houses that had a couple of positive cases in it has 18 people living in it. And so trying to get 18 people to isolate in a small house, I know I wouldn't want to be doing that.
Kirsty Burgu says they've been asking the government to create temporary accommodation since the start of the pandemic.
If one person got it, it'll run like a wildfire in a community. And that is exactly what has happened here.
The WA government believes its response is appropriate. It says extra staff have been deployed to regional areas to distribute thousands of food boxes to isolating families and coordinate the hotel quarantine program. But the situation has highlighted the housing crisis facing northern residents like Karen Sebastian.
I'm just reaching out for help to get accommodation for me and my kids to call home. That's all I ask.
Erin Park, ABC News, Derby.
In central Queensland, traditional owners are celebrating the handback of culturally significant land, but elders there say the historic moment is a reminder of the area's blood-stained past.
Loved ones embracing. Smoke welcoming visitors to the site where more than 300 Darumbal people were massacred more than a century ago.
It's an emotional day for us.
It's an historic moment.
It's our memories. It's worth more than money could buy. To us, it's in our hearts.
The Gawulla Aboriginal Land Trust is celebrating the handback of a 13-hectare parcel of land at the base of Guyee, formerly known as Mount Wheeler, between Rockhampton and Yeppoon.
This is what we wanted in the first place. We always wanted the massacre site, and we didn't get it.
The state government returned some land to the Darumbal people 15 years ago, but this particular area remained a reserve jointly managed by both parties. The handover of the deed means the traditional custodians are now the sole carers.
It's really important to everyone, every Darumbal person and every tribe.
It was really good to be out here all together.
The Darumbal people want to shine a light on the area's dark history. Elders say the spirits of their massacred ancestors remain here at this site. Uncle Bill Mann says the exhausting fight to reclaim the land has been worth it for the next generation.
Some of the ones are here will be doing it, taking it over, and I trust them to do it and do a good job.
A bright future emerging from a blood-stained past. Erin Semler, ABC News, Guyee.
Family, friends and colleagues have gathered in Mildura for the funeral of police officer Briar Joyce, who died in a car crash while on duty earlier this month. The 25-year-old senior constable was on duty in an unmarked police car when it collided with a ute at Red Cliffs. Hundreds of police officers lined the street to form a guard of honour for their fallen colleague. A soul bagpiper led the funeral procession as the police air wing conducted a flypast. Constable Joyce has been a police officer for 6 years. Chief Commissioner Shane Patton described her as a highly respected and competent officer. Infestations of yellow crazy ants are creating major headaches for North Queensland. They're capable of destroying ecosystems and lifestyles, and their arrival in Townsville is forcing residents to take matters into their own hands to stop the spread. Here's National Environment reporter Michael Slezak.
hi.
Go hi.
Samantha Kukutsa's yard is full of play equipment, but recently using it can be a nuisance.
They're getting little bites from them. When the kids play outside in the yard and they head in for a bath, sometimes there's ants in the bath that come off the kids.
The problem for Samantha and her kids happens to be one of the world's worst invasive species, a small acid-spitting ant called the yellow crazy ant.
They've multiplied. I think we've gone from a couple to millions.
Up the road, Vaughan and Yvonne are too frail to do much about their infestation and live with them all through the house.
It looks like the ants are crawling right up onto your feet here.
Yeah, they will. They'll crawl right up onto you. They'll come in up the front steps into the house. You'd hate a prospective buyer to come in and, oh yeah, well, what's all these ants?
While most ant species have separate nests, each with only one queen, yellow crazy ant nests can have an unlimited number of queens, each producing babies.
They basically cooperate as one massive nest that can cover tens to even hundreds of hectares. And so, yellow crazy ant's almost the perfect storm of a species.
And Dr. Hoffman says a huge amount of Australia is vulnerable.
You might as well just colour in all of the tropics, a fair bit of the subtropics, and maybe a bit more.
While the Cairns outbreak has been attacked with $30 million from the state and federal governments, here in Townsville it's being managed by the local council.
Impacts on humans, their pets.
Councillor Maury Saws says the municipality needs about $9 million of funding to buy baits and hire the people and helicopters needed to treat the area.
If we can get that sort of money, we can give it a red-hot show on getting rid of it.
Have an infestation on your property.
For the moment, residents are taking matters into their own hands, with the help of an environmental charity called the Invasive Species Council.
They will literally wipe out insect species, small reptiles, ground-dwelling birds, and then work their way through and collapse the ecosystem from the bottom up. And you look around your taps and
the charity is helping locals apply bait to their properties and lobbying state and federal governments for more funding.
Why brushing them off?
In the meantime, Samantha and her family are trying to survive alongside the tiny invaders.
I don't want the infestation in my home. That's a constant daily battle at this present point. Yep.
A battle that could spread across much of Australia. Michael Slezak, ABC News, Townsville.
It's best known as a centre for grain growing, but West Wyalong in New South Wales Riverina is turning its attention to technology. A father-son duo is setting up a balloon and drone testing facility to assist Australian defence and space agencies, and they say the technology could also save lives during natural disasters.
High in the stratosphere, this is no ordinary weather balloon. It's high-tech research with humble origins.
10 years ago, I brought my son, Jason, here to do a balloon flight as a father-son bonding exercise. We've done 49 so far.
Just 20, Jason Brand is the CEO of Flight Design, which creates, tests and analyses stratospheric balloons, drones and space technology. But he hasn't followed the path from school to university.
I learn in my own way, and that's through researching on the internet, actually having the objects in my hand and programming them.
Right now, they're working on a way to stabilise balloons in the stratosphere, something Robert says has never been achieved. The company will be based at a purpose-built hangar near West Wyalong.
This stuff is very futuristic. It's got computers on board, lots of computers. We'll be flying sensor packages for people like defence or business.
Robert Brand sees it as a future tool for emergency services, having almost lost his Blue Mountains home in the Black Summer bushfires.
The people who are making decisions would be able to get a very clear view of what the fire is doing 24 hours a day.
Curious locals have been watching with interest.
West Wyalong's known for gold production and agriculture, so this is very unique for us.
Robert and Jason have another ambition in mind, which they admit might seem a little far-fetched to some. It's to build a spaceport at West Wyalong to cater for the growing space industry. Proving isolation is no barrier to reaching for the stars. Shannon Corvo, ABC News, West Wyalong.
Drones are being put to a different use in North Queensland, scanning beaches for box jellyfish following the death of a teenager in Mackay earlier this year. The local council wants to see a trial up and running by summer in a bid to prevent more deaths.
The box jellyfish is among the deadliest of marine creatures and extremely difficult to detect.
They are deadly weapons in our sea, and I think that, you know, the more that people understand and know that, the better they can safeguard themselves.
Lifeguard Ross G was on duty the day 14-year-old Mark Angelo was fatally stung at Mackay's Armio Beach in February.
It was a major sting. It happened quickly, and we did our first aid till the second responders got there.
The Mackay Regional Council now wants to use drones to help spot and capture box jellyfish at beaches. It says they're 90% effective compared with the dragging nets currently used, which are only 5% effective.
Huge difference. Not being tried, trued and tested just yet, but it's certainly a glimmer of hope, I think, for keeping our beaches safe.
The drones are already used for surf rescues as well as shark and crocodile detection in Queensland, but researchers say they will only work in detecting box jellyfish if the water is clear.
But the trouble is these guys are often in quite murky water. They're amazingly transparent, so they're quite difficult to see.
Lifeguards say signage, stinger suits and education are still the best way to prevent more deaths. Hannah Walsh, ABC News, Mackay.
With farmers being urged to reduce their carbon footprint, machinery companies are trying to develop cleaner tractors. Some of the designs involve electric engines, while others would see hydrogen fuel cells replace diesel. Here's National Regional reporter Eliza Borrello.
This summer saw West Australian grain farmers like Neil Letter harvest a record-breaking crop. It was all powered by diesel, but he's open to an electric future.
I think the electric would, for example, would be a lot less maintenance, a lot more power efficient. Diesel or fuel's getting expensive.
Tractor companies are experimenting with electric prototypes. But while electric technology has car buyers convinced, it's taking longer to hit the mainstream tractor market.
They've got to be sufficient horsepower to meet all the different ranges that we need in power on our systems.
If we're talking about a tractor, we're talking about a lot more energy, and we're also talking about a network that probably isn't as, let's say, reliable and doesn't have the capacity that we might have in a city for drawing large volumes of or large amounts of energy.
We tend to have problems with power out here as it is, just with our household power.
Ammonia-fuelled tractors are also being tested, but research engineer Ben White believes diesel electric models will be the first lower carbon tractors sold widely in Australia.
Probably the short term, diesel electric will be where we go to, and then we might look at, perhaps hydrogen cells or fuel cells to then drive those electric drive systems.
We're always trying to do things to help the environment, and if this was one thing that could go ahead that would help, yeah, definitely be a great thing.
While there might be an appetite for change, it looks like farmers will have to be patient while technology and infrastructure catch up. Eliza Borrello, ABC News.
An outback school teacher with dyslexia and ADHD is breaking the stereotype about what makes a great educator. Advocacy bodies say teachers like her are needed in classrooms because they reflect the students in them.
For Lucy Senior, the classroom wasn't always a happy place. While she was a committed child, she was labelled lazy and stupid during school.
Teachers thought I wouldn't make it through high school. Teachers had said to me on graduation, "Didn't think we'd see you here."
Ms Senior's world finally started to make sense at university when she was diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD. She became a teacher to make sure others didn't have the experience she had.
I'm the art teacher for the whole school, which is prep to year 6, and then I am also the librarian.
Miss Senior is very kind, caring, funny and very good at art.
Raised on the Sunshine Coast, she moved to the town of Blackall for her first teaching job. Now she's sharing her strategies to cope with the outback community.
Not just impart that knowledge to the kids and give them strategies, but I can also talk to my colleagues and be like, have you thought about trying this?
The Australian Dyslexia Association says neurodiverse teachers are an asset to schools.
They can empathise with the children, they can break tasks down to make it easier, and the child relates really well because most teachers who have a neuro difference will actually let the child know as well.
It's estimated around 1 in 10 people are affected by dyslexia. Lucy Senior is hoping her story in this small outback school will start a conversation to help break the stigma.
She is so open about her, disability as she labels it. This is me, this is what my struggles have been. And, I've got parents that come in and they know her story, not through us, but through her in the community.
The more I can learn, the more I can realise a strategy for a kid with dyslexia might also help for a kid with ADHD or a kid that's just low in literacy.
Danielle O'Neill, ABC News, Blackall.
Chocolate eggs may still be on your mind at the moment, but it's chicken eggs which are set to be in short supply as producers in Tasmania and across the nation attempt to catch up with soaring demand. It's a rapid turnaround for the industry, which just 6 months ago was stuck with eggs they couldn't get rid of.
At this factory in Outer Hobart, they're busy sorting and packing eggs. But no matter how fast the machines churn out the trays, they're struggling to keep up with demand.
Demand is very crazy at the moment. It's a little bit tricky trying to keep everyone happy.
On farms across the state, they've struggled with flock numbers after COVID disruption hit consumers.
So for 2020 and 2021, we saw about a 30% decline in sales. So that actually left us with some surpluses.
Border reopenings and increasing travel are now seeing the demand for eggs surge.
So this year, with the visitor numbers increasing, people heading out to the local cafes and restaurants, we've just had a surge in demand that we weren't able to plan for.
That's left farmers scratching for more chickens.
We get our chicks every 15, 16 weeks and we've got to raise them for about 20 weeks before we even get an egg, and then they're too small to sell.
The rise in demand for eggs may have spiked in the past few months, but it's part of a larger trend. 5 years ago, Australia used to export more eggs than we imported, but now that's swung around the other way. Australians are eating on average 1.7 kilos, or roughly 30 eggs more each year than they did 5 years ago.
So if you look at the average egg weight of about 58 grams, it equates to about 14.4 kilos of egg consumed by Australians per annum per year.
The shortage is likely to stretch on for several months as egg producers scramble to build flocks. Luke Radford, ABC News.
The legend of Troy Cassar-Daley has just grown a little larger. He's broken Slim Dusty's record for most wins at the Australian Country Music Awards. Cassar-Daley won his 40th Golden Guitar in Tamworth. Our reporter Caitlin Furlong was there to see him do it.
No matter what your bloodlines, you belong to this land. Yeah.
A welcome to country like no other at the start of a record-breaking night.
We're making some country music history tonight, everyone. It's Troy Cassar-Daley.
The man of the hour taking home 3 awards for a career total of 40, eclipsing the record first set by Slim Dusty.
I would think Slim would be smiling now, saying, well done, and he would like the fact that it's moving forward, and you can't stop it.
The win also took Cassar-Daley past his mate and fellow industry legend Lee Kernaghan.
He said, whatever happens tonight, I'll be really proud of you. And it's just lovely to hear that from one of your mates.
Life is great, nothing beats what we got. It was also a good night for the up-and-comers, with Tamworth's own Ashley Dallas named Female Artist of the Year.
I started dreaming in this town. I'm a proud local girl.
Becky Cole took out one of the top honours, an induction into the role of renown after a period of mental health struggles.
I can't believe that the universe, the goddess up there, has given me the absolute highest honour in the shittest year I've ever had.
Celebrations too for Shane Nicholson, who took home 4 awards, including Album of the Year. A golden night for the winners, and an entire industry bouncing back from the pandemic. Caitlin Furlong, ABC News, Tamworth.
That's the latest from ABC Regional News for now. I'm Alexandra Alvaro. Thanks for your company.
The Brazilian butchers.
The control they exert is enormous.
JBS is the biggest of them all.
If I had have acted in the way that they have acted, I think I would be in jail.
Carving up Australia's food.
It will come as a surprise to a lot of viewers that a company linked to so many scandals has been allowed to come into Australia.
You have to ask, what is going on? Why is that company so supported by our politicians?
I would not trust them anywhere. Be wary in Australia.
Four Corners, Monday, ABC TV and ABC iView.
What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?
Hand-painted signwriting is definitely a dying art.
For him to go on television speaking Italian, my God, it will blow you away.
Who is this guy?
This will remain an unseen, invisible, yet remarkable story.
Oh, I think you've got it.
Some shows are informative.
Unprecedented in modern times.
Others are entertaining.
For those who have a go.
But only one show is a bona fide public service.
Story after story.
The team at The Weekly watches all the news so that you don't have to, and puts it all together again so you know everything you need to and nothing you don't. The Weekly. You give us 30 minutes, we'll give you the week. Some assembly required.
The Weekly returns Wednesday 8:30.
The most exciting thing about election nights is the night where we hand it over to the voters. After all of those weeks and months, all the polls, all the predictions, politicians trying to control events, just for a few hours on election night. They have no control at all. It's up to the voters and nobody knows what they're going to do. It's quite a humbling moment for everybody who thinks they're an expert in politics.
Reports from Ukraine, Russia has resumed attacks on the Mariupol steel plant, seeking to eliminate the city's last resistance. The Prime Minister faces more questions over national security as the US warns against allowing a Chinese military base in the Solomons. Queensland and the Commonwealth scramble to find new uses for the state's near-empty COVID quarantine hub. And all bets are on, an Anzac Day tradition extended to run the whole long weekend in New South Wales. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Mariam Saab. Ukraine says Russian forces have resumed attacks on a steel plant in the besieged city of Mariupol in an attempt to eliminate the last pocket of resistance in the city. In a briefing, an advisor to the Ukrainian president claimed Russian forces had resumed airstrikes on the plant and were trying to storm it, in an apparent reversal of an order Russian President Vladimir Putin gave 2 days ago. It's estimated 1,000 civilians are sheltering in the plant alongside the remaining Ukrainian fighters. And it comes after new pictures emerged showing what life has been like inside the last stronghold. Our correspondent Nick Dole reports from Lviv.
The UN says this war tells a horror story of violations against civilians. Russia has pounded the key port city of Mariupol with cataclysmic force. Vladimir Putin calls it liberation. But this group of women and children are trapped underground. Video shared by the far-right Azov battalion shows for the first time what life is like for some civilians hiding in the besieged steelworks. I hope we can see the sun, this boy says. We've been here for 2 months.
Even wars have rules, and these need to be respected. Otherwise, we are very afraid of what could come next.
A Russian commander has now given the first detailed insight into what that might be, revealing Vladimir Putin wants full control of southern Ukraine and the Donbass. That would give troops better access to annexed Crimea and this Russian-backed separatist area in neighbouring Moldova. Ukraine's president claims it proves Putin has ambitions beyond his country's borders.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine was intended only as a beginning. Then they want to capture other countries.
But The immediate concern is in the parts of Ukraine where civilians are deliberately being targeted.
This is a terrible life. I need to leave, but where? I was hoping it would be okay here. Hope dies last.
In the city of Kharkiv, volunteers are working against the clock to sew soldiers' flak jackets.
It would be good to have had everything done yesterday, or even better if it was all done last week.
We should be certain that if the West doesn't continue to support Ukraine, the Russians have a much greater chance of rolling over the country and installing a puppet regime.
In the forests outside the capital, Ukraine's young defenders, like law student Vlad Nekrotenko, are readying for that possibility.
Let's say we lose our positions on Donbass or Lugansk region, and then they see that we don't have enough troops and resources to protect Kiev. They would come back for their initial aim to take over our capital and take over our government.
While some churches here are boarded up, many Ukrainians will still be trying to celebrate Orthodox Easter this weekend, 58 days into a war that British intelligence warns could last at least another year.
We hope for a resurrection. We believe in the victory of life over death.
A country clinging on to its right to exist. Nick Dole, ABC News, Lviv.
Federal Labor is accusing the coalition of trying to deflect from its own foreign policy failures by dredging up old speeches from Deputy Opposition Leader Richard Marles and twisting the meaning for political gain. The controversial security pact between China and Solomon Islands continues to dominate the election campaign, with the government facing ongoing criticism that it was complacent about Beijing's growing influence in the South Pacific. From Canberra, here's our political reporter Matthew Doran.
Galina, nice to meet you. Winning over the public can require a bit of bait.
And is that just a marketing gimmick, or does that work?
Scott Morrison hoping to lure more Australians to vote for the coalition in 4 weeks' time, with $20 million to upgrade boat ramps and campsites across the country.
There we go. Not too bad.
Although he wasn't keen to be on the hook for any questions on the pledge. Or anything else for that matter.
Why won't you talk to us about national security?
Leaving it to the rest of his crew to launch into another day of drilling down on the Deputy Labor leader's record.
Done under pressure.
His startling comments and approach to China show a real national security concern should the Labor Party be elected.
The assertion that's being made by the government is just another desperate attempt to divert from their failings in the Pacific.
The coalition is accusing Richard Marles of sharing an advance copy of a speech to a Beijing-based university with the Chinese embassy in Canberra back in 2019.
A speech in which he said that he would encourage China's engagement in the Pacific.
There were no changes whatsoever made to a speech that I made in China criticising China in public. Now, what government minister has done that?
The attacks against Mr Marles aren't new.
We got another Manchurian candidate.
But with Anthony Albanese on day 2 of COVID-19 isolation, with only a furry friend for company, the coalition's focus is firmly on his understudy.
We've got a 50-year-old apprentice at the moment.
Yeah. As it tries to deflect criticism, it let China muscle in on Australia's turf, signing a security pact with Solomon Islands.
What we're seeing at present is a high level of hypocrisy from the Labor Party.
Under their watch, they have let the Pacific go.
The coalition spruiks its national security and foreign policy credentials at every turn, even though China's sortie in the Solomons does point to a failure in that strategic wrestle with Beijing. The opposition will be hoping to exploit that in coming weeks, and it's indicating it will boost foreign aid spending in a bid to counter China's growing regional influence if the ALP win office. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Canberra.
And the United States has warned against allowing a Chinese military base in Solomon Islands, promising to fast-track reopening its embassy in Honiara. The US embassy there was shut down nearly 30 years ago. Former acting US ambassador to Australia, James Caruso, says it was a mistake to close it in the first place.
You can't treat a country with neglect or outsource your relationship, certainly not if you want to be a and influence in the region without having presence on the ground. So yeah, that was, I think, a mistake by the United States over a long time.
The US says it would respond accordingly if China made any moves to establish a military base in Solomon Islands. Australia says it welcomes the renewed US engagement in the Pacific. The state and federal governments are scrambling to find new uses for Queensland's 2 purpose-built quarantine hubs as the state's isolation rules relax even further. Just 72 people are currently housed at the 1,000-bed Wellcamp facility in Toowoomba, and the Pinkenbar facility is due to open next month.
1,000 beds purpose-built for one reason: quarantine. But Queensland's COVID rules relax on Thursday, meaning unvaccinated international arrivals and asymptomatic close contacts no longer need to isolate, and making the state government's controversial Wellcamp facility obsolete.
There's only a handful of people who have used that facility, and taxpayers are still paying for empty hotel rooms, for meals that will never be served.
The state government paid $48 million to build the Queensland Regional Accommodation Centre at Wellcamp, while the site is owned by the Wagner Company. The government operates it on a year-long lease, a cost that remains unknown.
That cost deserves to be known by every Queenslander, and the government has to be held accountable for a deal that they have been struck.
Since it opened in February, Wellcamp has housed 504 people. Today, just 72 are living at the site, but the state government maintains Wellcamp is value for money.
And this came back to the federal government not stepping up and doing what it was responsible for, and that was quarantine. So we acted, it has been used, it is still being used, and I believe it will continue to be used. Discussions will be happening with the cruise ship industry in the coming weeks about people that test positive on a cruise ship.
It'll also be used to house COVID-positive people who don't have a place to isolate, and potentially international travellers who need to complete pre-departure quarantine.
This has been part of our keeping Queenslanders safe during COVID, and I think it will continue to play that role going forward.
A second quarantine facility is expected to open here at Pinkenbar next month, when Queensland's quarantine rules will have already relaxed. The 500-bed facility has been built by the federal government. Its cost is also unknown. But the Finance Minister is confident the site will prove its worth.
To serve future health crises or future pandemic situations, just as they will be able to respond to natural disaster emergencies in the provision of emergency accommodation or to humanitarian crises from overseas.
Toby Jers-Lewis, ABC News.
Calls of come-in spinner are coming in a little earlier this year. Normally, 2-up is only legal on Anzac Day here in New South Wales. But this long weekend, it's been given official approval for all 3 days. The state government says it's trying to help pubs and clubs make up for time lost to COVID.
Getting a head start to Anzac Day. The traditional betting game has come early under a special relaxation.
Today it felt like a proper Anzac kind of weekend. Everyone is out in the spirit of it. We had bands playing, we had buglers out there. It's good. We're back to normal.
Billed as a one-off special measure by the state government, it's the first time the game can be legally played outside of Anzac Day, apart from Broken Hill, which has a special licence year-round.
The boys are getting excited about coming down and playing a bit of 2-up. Just a bit of a taste for Monday and what's going to happen.
For some Aussies, it's a way to connect with those they've lost.
My grandpa was in Anzac, but he has since passed. But so we come every year to celebrate for him and have a good time. You know what I mean? Play a bit of 2-up, drink a few beers, and you know what I mean? Just enjoy it.
To have people back into the venue and just having that ambiance around, it makes everyone happy.
It's a boost for pubs and clubs, trying to pull people back to venues post-pandemic.
We've had a really hard time in the last 2 years with COVID. We've had restriction after restriction, and I think it's just a real big win for hospitality.
This Anzac Day will see a return of full-scale services and marches. It's also the first commemoration since the ADF's withdrawal from Afghanistan. Diggers have pointed out that it's pubs and clubs that'll reap the rewards of the 2 extra days of 2-up, and they're hoping the windfall will incentivise licensed venues to donate a share of the profits to support veterans. 2 more days of testing your fortunes. Tim Swanston, ABC News, Sydney.
Port Adelaide has snapped a 5-game losing streak, thrashing West Coast by 84 points at Adelaide Oval. Jamie Crisp kicked the opening goal inside a minute for the Eagles before Port took control. The Power kicking 11 unanswered goals to record its biggest ever three-quarter time lead.
Has he got the shape? Oh, that'll be popular. Welcome back, Kane Farrell.
Jeremy Finlayson finished with a career-best 5 goals for Port Adelaide as the club recorded their first win of the season. The Sunshine Coast Lightning are in Super Netball's top 4 after defeating the Swifts in Sydney. It was a physical clash between the sides as the Lightning jumped out to an early lead, but the Swifts pegged the score back to trail by just a point at half-time. Just when the hosts looked to get the upper hand, Sunshine Coast shooter Riley Batcheldor nailed 4 straight super shots.
Well, when you're feeling it, you're feeling it, and isn't she what? Takes the Sunshine Coast Lightning out by 3.
The Lightning would extend their buffer in the 4th quarter to win by 7 points. That'll be their 3rd win in the last 4 matches. Let's take a quick look at the weather in the capital cities for Sunday before we go. Brisbane, a shower or 2. Sydney can expect a shower or 2 as well. Canberra will be mostly sunny. Melbourne becoming mostly sunny. For Hobart, it's partly cloudy. Adelaide, partly cloudy. Perth, sunny. And Darwin, sunny with a top there of 34. And that's the latest from ABC News. Remember, you can keep up to date at news.abc.net.au and on ABC iView. I'm Mariam Saab. Thank you for your company.
On the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918, it was finally all quiet on the Western Front. It marked the end of 4 brutal years of bloody and bitter conflict. The guns of the war that was supposed to end all wars fell silent. The stillness of Armistice Day echoes a moment in time, but 100 years on, the aftershocks continue to reverberate throughout history.
Yesterday was a wonderful day. There has been an armistice. The Bosch has given in. 2 months ago, we would not have thought it possible. Fancy, no more wounded. People were dancing in the street.
I believe the people in Blighty are simply mad with excitement now the armistice has been signed. Thank goodness no more bombs or shells. It's hard for us to realise it is so.
I'd almost reached my destination when the 3 guns boomed out. It was the proclamation of the German surrender to the Allies. In an instant, Paris was in uproar. Every bell in the city began to ring. People cheered and sang and embraced one another. I collected more kisses in half an hour than in all my life before.
On November the 7th, 1919, King George V issued a proclamation.
To all my people, Tuesday next, November the 11th, is the first anniversary of the armistice
which stayed the worldwide carnage of the 4 preceding years and marked the victory of right and freedom. To afford an opportunity for the universal expression, there may be, for brief space of 2 minutes, a complete suspension of all our normal activities. All work, all sound, and all locomotion should cease, so that in perfect stillness the thoughts of everyone may be concentrated on reverent remembrance of the glorious dead.
Here in Australia, the horror of war helped define our nation, and for generations to come, many soldiers returned home wounded and shell-shocked. Across the country, those who'd lost fathers, brothers and sons erected memorials to those who didn't come home. "100 years on, there's barely a town or suburb that doesn't have an Anzac memorial, small or large, all treasured monuments, still cared for by the communities that built them." What began as a glorious adventure to fight for king and country ended in death and despair for tens of thousands. In all, 62,000 diggers died during the war, the ultimate sacrifice for our peace and prosperity. In 1914, Australia's population was just 4.9 million. Around 420,000 volunteered for service, representing a staggering 38% of the male population aged between 18 and 44.
It's a long, long way to Tipperary, but my heart's right there.
Men, women, Indigenous Australians from all walks of life answered the call. Many young men walked hundreds of kilometres to enlist in the newly formed Australian Imperial Force. At the outbreak of war, 52,000 young men joined up. By 1915, more than 160,000 swelled the ranks of the armed forces. But as the true horrors of the war filtered home and the casualty rate increased, those volunteering decreased. In the last year of the war, just 29,000 came forward to fight the Germans. There was a huge recruitment campaign led by newspaper advertisements and supported by posters appealing to a sense of patriotism and pride. There was a national consensus that we were fighting a righteous war, and volunteering was the right moral choice.
We were so tied to Great Britain that when she was in trouble, it was just automatic feeling of it's your duty.
I had always said in my younger days, when I was just a youngster, that if ever a war broke out, I would offer myself.
Holding the knees, the men he breathes, there's fighting to be done. Australians heard and were prepared to help her every son.
By 1916, the AIF faced a shortage of men. Labor Prime Minister Billy Hughes made 2 attempts to introduce conscription. There were referendums in 1916 and 1917. Both lost to the no vote. Feelings on the issue ran high and the community was deeply divided. But Australia and South Africa were the only participating countries not to introduce conscription. For Australia, the second year of the war marked our official entry into the conflict. It's when the initials of the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps were first grouped together to form the code word ANZAC. "30,000 troops left the Western Australian port of Albany on board a flotilla of ships bound for Egypt and the battlefields of the Great War.
We got to a place called Albany, Western Australia, and What we were doing there, I wasn't quite sure, but there was an amalgamation there of all the different ships. And that's where the convoy started. I think we had as many as about 40 ships in the convoy. It was a most remarkable sight.
They had no idea where they were going or that many would never return, nor could they imagine the carnage in Gallipoli or the Western Front.
Throughout the voyage, training continues on all ships of the convoy, even if the drill squads do find it difficult to hold their lines on the heaving decks.
The Australians arrived in Cairo and quickly became known for their larrikin nature, their refusal to salute British officers and their rowdy, unruly behaviour on leave.
But the fun we had was Cairo. Well, you've never seen anything like it in all your life. God bless me, I hadn't sold a bloody brothel started. I'll guarantee every second place was a brothel.
Sex, drugs, drink and disease. The Egyptian capital offered exotic temptations and new levels of depravity for the young soldiers.
Cairo is a very immoral place. In fact, they say it's the worst town in the world. Some streets there is nothing but brothels and houses of infamy, where every possible vice under the sun exists.
Simmering tensions between the Allied soldiers and the locals erupted on Good Friday, known as the Battle of Waza in the Red Light District. More than 2,000 soldiers torched brothels, clashed with local authorities and ran riot. Private signaller Sam Norris noted,
"They ransacked numberless brothels, piled the furniture in the road and burnt it. The Red Caps came along and shot about a dozen men, killing 4 or 5. Brawls kept taking place everywhere."
On April the 1st, following a divisional field day in which the Anzacs impressed British officers, they were ordered to the front. The soldiers of the AIF were out to prove themselves to each other and the rest of the world.
They had trained hard. They'd had their sprees, which made Cairo shudder. But the Australians in Egypt now knew that April of 1915 would be momentous. They would be landing in Turkey.
The hopeless shambles of Gallipoli would become a byword for tragedy, but also courage, mateship and bravery. In our darkest hour, they displayed a valour against almost impossible odds and defined the Anzac spirit. The fatal shore was a killing ground, but a glorious defeat will be remembered more than any of our victories. Gallipoli is firmly enshrined in our national psyche. Today, this rocky strip of beach is known as Anzac Cove, but for the Australian and New Zealand soldiers, it was known simply as Z Beach. It was dark when the first 1,500 men came ashore. They were wet, almost certainly afraid, and much further north than they expected.
The Anzacs were hit by a hail of fire as they stood crammed together in the boats or toppled out into the water, some to flounder and drown under the weight of their own equipment. But they struggled, those who did land, across the deadly strip of sand to the protection of the craggy cliffs and hills.
All the bullets and the shrapnel, and that went on for hours and hours, and we had to fall back. And I remember touching a fellow, I said, "Come, Dig, we have to get back." But he was dead.
Had struggled ashore and been shot dead. 2 boats of Australians. I remember that quite well, because that shocked me when it was the first I'd seen it. Death.
You're only looking after yourself. You couldn't worry about the other bloke. They weren't prepared for the slaughter.
The voices of the men who fought in Gallipoli have long gone quiet, but the rugged peninsula is still riddled with the scars of that bloody, ill-fated campaign. There are so many myths around the Gallipoli legacy, but the reality is it was a merciless machine gun massacre, a doomed campaign of attrition as the Allies tried to break through the Turkish lines and the Turks tried to drive the invaders back into the sea.
You have have now only to dig, dig, dig until you are safe, they were told. The name Digger caught on not long afterwards.
In the first 3 days of the campaign, 2,500 men were killed and more than 5,000 wounded. It was trench warfare in treacherous terrain. In an effort to break the European deadlock, Gallipoli was ironically turning into a stalemate as tightly locked up as the Western Front. And there was no end to the killing.
Last thing I said to him, don't forget the sniper, keep down as you go across this little area. And I was horrified I was sitting there watching him go, lovely sunny day, and he walking upright. Oh God, I thought. And I yelled to him, get down, get down. Too late, he was hit in the side, went right through his heart. And he just sung, oh God, and dropped. Well, that was the worst incident to me of the whole campaign.
Zaten başını çıkaramazsın ki daima mermi geliyor. Mermi geldiği için ondan sonra başını çıkaramazsın. Mutlak siperde kendini muhafaza ederekten mesela ki tüfeğini ona göre kullanacaksın. Ama başını kaldırdığın vakitte bir süre gelen mermi doğrudan doğruya başına geldik. Öyle kendini kollamayan da öyle ne kadar gitti. Kendini kollamayan bir dakika öyle cesaretlilik yapıp da
Oh, yeah, they were all to go, the periscopic rifle. Oh, my, well, that's the only thing you could use. Oh, you wasn't stupid enough to put your head up. Oh, no, periscopic rifles, they were the in thing. They were well thought out, too.
And the peninsula was becoming one of the most miserable places to fight anywhere in the entire war. Disease would plague the men, dysentery, typhoid and cholera spread by rotting corpses and swarms of flies. The Allies attempted to break through the lines in August, including the attacks at Lone Pine and the Neck. Both became iconic battles filled with courageous acts. 7 Victoria Crosses were awarded in just one day for incredible displays of bravery, but both resulted in little gain for such senseless slaughter.
I was in that lot, and over we went, and this machine gunner, he got me, but I got him, because we was making the bayonet charge, and if his machine gun hadn't jammed, I wouldn't have been there now.
Well, I never remember a soldier refusing to go to his death.
I wasn't a hero. It was just a case of you made friends and mates, you know, and that while you were in training and that sort of thing, and you wanted to join them. Not from any bloody hero. Don't put me down as that, for God's sake. I was no bloody hero.
Field Marshal Lord Kitchener, the Commander-in-Chief of the British Army, arrived on the peninsula in early November, and after surveying the futility of the standoff, he ordered the evacuation of the garrison. The Anzac sector here and Suvla Bay to the north were the first areas to be evacuated. The senior Australian officer, Brudenell White, put together an ingenious evacuation plan. It showed their ingenuity in warfare with an elaborate deception operation.
Haberimiz olmadı. Haberimiz olmadı. Yalnız silah sesi yok. Top sesi yok.
The retreat became the most successful operation of the campaign. High Command had feared 30% casualties, and in the end, just 2 soldiers were slightly injured. We'd managed to extract some honour from our disastrous defeat, but it came at a huge cost. About 1 in every 6 Australians who went to Gallipoli died there. For the New Zealanders, nearly a third never returned. The Turks too suffered greatly. More than a quarter of them, about 87,000, died defending their homeland. For the veterans who survived, so much worse was to come as they fought bigger, bloodier and more pointless battles on the Western Front. It stretched in a continuous line of trenches from the English Channel to the Swiss frontier. More than 700 kilometres, millions of men on both sides, with victories measured in mere metres over months. It was industrialised siege warfare, spitting out lead and steel, consuming flesh and blood.
Over the top. First wave, second wave.
Australian troops entered their first major battle on the Western Front near the French village of Fromelles as part of the Battle of the Somme. It was ill-conceived, futile, and remains the greatest tragedy of our military history. More than 5,500 diggers were cut down by German machine guns.
Stranded, the Australians realized they could not hold the position, and in withdrawal, were forced to fight their way out, just as fiercely as they'd fought their way in. By 9:30 on this same morning, the attack had fizzled out. The Australians collected their wounded and counted their dead. They were stunned at the obvious stupidity of the High Command.
In fact, the British lost as many soldiers in one day on the Somme as they did in the 9 months of the Gallipoli campaign.
One battalion, the 60th, had gone into the fight almost 900 strong. At roll call, only 107 answered their name.
Even with the fog of war, it seems almost incomprehensible why so many willingly volunteered for such catastrophic annihilation. The battlefield became a testing ground for a range of new weapons, technologies and machines that changed the way war was fought forever. The machine gun allowed a small team of soldiers to mow down advancing infantry with ease. But it was the artillery that did the most killing. In an effort to break the stalemate, both sides built bigger guns to pound enemy strongholds. Huge barrages would precede big operations, but the constant bombardments couldn't break the deadlock.
Little remained of the village after the fierce 2 days of fighting, but what did remain was quickly obliterated during the following 2 days, when the Germans laid down the heaviest artillery bombardment ever put down on the British Army on the Western Front. The landscape, featureless but ever-changing under the massive high explosives, became a huge burial ground as Australian troops disintegrated in the shell bursts.
In one attack in late September 1918, British guns fired nearly 1 million shells in just 48 hours. The static nature of the war led military leaders to open a new subterranean front, where miners dug explosive-packed tunnels deep beneath the enemy lines. It was a deadly game of cat and mouse, deep underground, with the Germans and the Allies struggling desperately to locate and destroy each other's tunnels.
Below the ground, the tunnellers are at work on mines under the enemy positions. Listening for their sapping suggests that enemy countermining is close. When this is confirmed, work must be hurried.
Tunnel warfare reached its peak when 19 mines were blown along the Messines Ridge in Flanders, Belgium. The blast was so huge it left a massive crater and was heard as far away as London. Still, there was no end to the impasse, so they turned to an insidious new weapon, poison gas. Despite being considered uncivilised and banned under the Hague Conventions, both sides launched chemical weapons to gain a war-winning edge. It had a profound psychological effect on the soldiers. It terrified them, a ghostly green cloud of chlorine. By 1917, the standard issue gas mask provided effective protection against chlorine, so all sides turned to gases which maimed soldiers wearing masks. Mustard gas could kill by blistering the lungs and throat if inhaled, but on masked soldiers, it produced painful blisters all over the body. Chemical and biological warfare proved more effective psychologically than as a weapon of mass destruction.
A new concept in warfare. The land battleship has a new name. Its code word, the tank.
There's a common misconception that the arrival of the tank, a lumbering hulk of metal bristling with guns, changed the course of the war. But the early versions were slow, cumbersome and easy targets for artillery, making them a death trap.
The new Whippet tanks are fast, 16 miles an hour, faster than a man on foot.
The upgraded models were designed to cross the crater-strewn no man's land and drive over the tangled barbed wire and enemy trenches. Military commanders saw the advantages of launching a full-scale offensive backed by these new, smaller and more mobile tanks. In the spring of 1918, the Germans launched a massive assault on the little French town of Villers-Bretonneux. It would become one of our greatest victories of the war, and for the first time involved tanks fighting against tanks. The outcome of the battle would change the course of European history.
Villers-Bretonneux, all of it that still stands. This has been the key to Amiens. Here on the 14th and 24th of April, the Germans are held and the line stabilized. Now in the streets you see only our troops and their French allies from the Moroccan division, scavenging for anything of use, resting in fresh country.
The Germans launched their spring offensive. The goal was to take the town of Amiens, a key road, rail and transport hub. The Allies feared that to lose Amiens would be to lose Paris and the war. The first domino to fall to the Germans was the village of Le Hamel and the strategic lookout called Hill 104.
On March the 21st, 1918, the Germans launched 57 divisions into the attack along the Somme. They forced the weary British Fifth Army to fall back. The Australian Corps, for several critical days in April, holds the entire line in front of Amiens.
On the night of April the 24th, two Australian brigades, the 13th and the 15th, used the unconventional tactic of attacking at night and from opposite directions. It was a risky move.
I went to bed thoroughly depressed, feeling certain that this hurried attack would fail hopelessly.
The Australians triumphed, and against the odds, within 24 hours, the German occupation of Villers-Bretonneux was over. It was lost on no one that victory came on the 3rd anniversary of the Anzac landings at Gallipoli. The victory at Villers drew a new front line, virtually ending the German offensive on the Somme. About 2,400 Australians died in the battle, a heavy price, but with a lasting legacy.
Today, the windmill site, the Australians' main objective in those fierce battles of not so long ago, remains Australian soil. Purchased by Australia after the war, it marks the scene of the Anzac's first great action on the Western Front and serves as a constant reminder to all who pass along the old Roman road that this mile of ridge is, of all places on earth, the most densely sown with Australian sacrifice.
For the thousands of Australian diggers who died on the battlefields of the Western Front, whose bodies could not be identified, their tombstones were inscribed with the English writer Rudyard Kipling's words, "A soldier of the Great War, known unto God." The remains of an unknown Australian soldier killed in World War I were returned from France in 1993 and buried here in this tomb within the Australian War Memorial's Hall of Memory to honour all Australians who've died in wars. The defeat at Villers was the beginning of the end for the Germans. The armistice was formally signed in the railway carriage of Allied Supreme Commander Ferdinand Foch, signed at 5 a.m. in the morning on November the 11th, and came into effect 6 hours later at 11 a.m. Around the world there were wild celebrations and church bells rang out across war-torn Europe. The Australian Armed Forces joined with other Allied soldiers to parade past Buckingham Palace as part of the Victory Parade. But the end of the war presented new challenges. How to treat the large number of wounded and disabled men, The returned soldiers and ex-servicemen faced severe problems when they came home. The pension was inadequate, there were no facilities for rehabilitation, and jobs were hard to come by. Australians across the country marked the first anniversary of Armistice Day with a moment's silence at 11 a.m. to commemorate those who died and suffered during the Great War.
Remembrance, yes. Right, but not to anyone that tells me about glorification of war is a bloody lunatic.
It was a day we celebrated friendship. We'd have our reunions and that sort of business. We'd have a few beers a night. We never spoke about armistice or anything. We spoke about the fun we had over there. Our concern wasn't about the fellas were killed or anything. They were gone.
On average, 38 members of the Australian Armed Forces died every day during the 1,560 days of the First World War. The Armistice Day commemorations give us all a moment to reflect on those who fought and fell, the grief and anguish still felt after the last gun fired the last shot of the Great War, the war to end all wars.
Anzac Day. Commemorate with us. Tune in from 4:30 for a full day's coverage, starting with the dawn service live from Sydney. Then we cross to the Australian War Memorial in Canberra, followed by a news breakfast special and the marches from your state capital. Later, we remember the fallen,
whose spirit will forever be part of Australia's identity.
as we travel to Gallipoli and Villers-Bretonneux. Anzac Day across the ABC.
Police say Mr. Justice Opaz was shot with a .22 calibre weapon.
The Parramatta blast shattered brickwork in the forecourt of the empty family court building.
Who premeditated and pre-planned the crimes.
This series of crimes is unparalleled in Australian history.
Len turned around and said, I can shoot you anytime I want to.
The Family Court Murders starts Tuesday, May 10 on ABC TV and ABC iView.
I think on election night, we're all hoping for that little moment when you see politicians drop their guard.
After the polls close at 6 p.m, it goes quiet. So you're waiting for that clock to tick.
The campaigning's over and they tell us what they really think.
Yeah, this is what the nation's waiting for. It's big.
It's also fascinating to see a bit more from our politicians, how they handle victory, how they handle defeat.
And that defeat speech, it's the moment where you see them at their most honest, their most raw. There is nothing like it.
So what you're seeing here is a lie. This video was posted on the official Telegram channel for the self-declared Donetsk People's Republic on February 18th. The account says it shows members of a saboteur group that's part of the Ukrainian army planning to blow up a chlorine tank near Gorlivka, a city in the Donetsk region in eastern Ukraine. The video's metadata, which Telegram preserves, revealed it was created at least 10 days before the events apparently took place. And then there's this. YouTube actually has a video with the exact same name from 2010. What we hear at 1 minute and 51 seconds into this military exercise video is a very close match to the boom we hear in the video posted on the account on Telegram. It's pretty clear that boom sound has been added in afterwards. The information war has only escalated since then, and while it might seem like a sophisticated, high-tech operation, it's really not as complicated as you might think. The Kremlin's disinformation playbook can be traced back years. What's unfolding right now in Ukraine feels very similar to the conflict in Syria. After a chemical attack killed at least 281 people in Ghouta in August 2013, President Putin wrote an op-ed in the New York Times saying opposition forces gassed their own people to provoke intervention by their powerful foreign patrons. This contradicts the overwhelming evidence that the attacks were carried out by the Syrian government. The Human Rights Watch concluded that the evidence all points to Syrian government responsibility for the attacks, including the fact that the weapon systems used were known to be in the possession of the Syrian government armed forces, and government-controlled launching sites were within range of the targets. It found alternative claims that opposition forces were responsible to be lacking in credibility and inconsistent with evidence found at the scene. After another deadly chemical attack in Doma in 2018, the Russian Defense Ministry said the attack had been faked by the West. Similar to the claims made about Ghouta, these claims were never substantiated by independent investigators. In fact, the use of a toxic chemical as a weapon was confirmed in a fact-finding mission. But convincing the world to believe his version of events was never really Putin's objective.
But the point was not to create a persuasive counter story. The aim was just to create so many different stories that truth gets lost among all of them.
Jumbled up counter stories are a key tactic in the information war that Russia is waging right now. After Russian troops withdrew from Bucha, a town 16 kilometers outside of Kiev, reports emerged of bodies lying in the streets.
More horrific revelations surfaced,
synonymous with death and devastation.
On Telegram, the Russian defense denied killing civilians, saying accusations are just another provocation. This was repeated on Twitter, where they called evidence from Bucha a hoax. Both of these statements also claimed that residents had not suffered from any violent action. The Russian embassy in Canada went one step further, saying footage taken from a car driving through the town shows an arm on one of the corpses moving. These claims have been proven false by independent fact-checkers. For example, the BBC here concluded that the moving arm was actually a mark on the windscreen. But there are also claims from Russian officials saying that the killings occurred after their troops had left town. The deputy chairman of the Security Council claimed enraged beasts from nationalist battalions are ready to casually kill their own civilians in a bid to dehumanize Russia. Well, fact-checkers have also exposed that as a lie. By their own account in the Ministry of Defense statement, Russian troops had withdrawn from Bucha by March 30th, but satellite images show bodies on the ground on March 19th. The New York Times verified that the bodies appearing in the satellite images were still in the same position when the town was reclaimed by Ukrainian forces on April 1st.
Independent journalists couldn't get into Bucha prior to April 1st, but satellites were orbiting while Russia was in the town, and we could pinpoint when the bodies emerged and where they were, and we could see that they lay on the streets in the same position for several weeks. It's classic Russian deception.
Now, I've been covering disinformation for a while, and there's a lot in Putin's playbook that's been tried and tested. Bots are a big one. Researchers have already found evidence of the pro-Russian hashtag #IStandWithPutin being amplified by an apparent bot network, which was then used by legitimate profiles. This same tactic was uncovered in the aftermath of the 2016 US presidential election. Then there's whataboutism. Basically, focusing on other wrongdoing to deflect from Russia's own misconduct. We can see examples of this in state-sponsored media, like this Sputnik's list of the US most terrible war crimes since World War II, and a classic, creating conspiracies like the one about Ukraine developing bioweapons.
The US ambassador and representative before the Security Council simply dismissed these allegations as conspiracy theories.
But this war's different. There's something happening that I've never seen before. Now, for a bit of context, reputable media outlets like Reuters, the BBC, and yes, the ABC, employ teams of people to sort fact from fiction. Apparently, so do pro-Russian Telegram groups. We've found half a dozen of them appearing to operate as independent fact-checkers. One post on Telegram tried to fact-check a video showing a Russian attack on a civilian car near Kiev on February 28th. First, the channel writes that the type of truck isn't used in a special operation in Ukraine. But in reality, there's been at least 150 documented BMP-2s used by the Russians, which have been either captured, abandoned, or destroyed. And these are just the ones that we have photographic evidence of. A different fake bunk channel asks, why did no one try to jump out of the car? And says there should have been a lot of human remains scattered on the road. They conveniently forgot to include another video which did show a close-up of the gory aftermath. Now, we went ahead and independently verified this ourselves, both the CCTV footage and the aftermath. We matched the blue roof and the tree lines to geolocate the scene against satellite imagery above the area. And then we verified the visible time code on the CCTV footage, which says it's about 1:15 in the afternoon. Using photos taken on February 28th, the day of the attack, we can see it was a clear and sunny day. Then, just to be sure, we also calculated the angle of the shadows to the stated time of the day and found a pretty close match. The Telegram post signs off by writing, "This material is buried in the cemetery of fakes. Rest in peace, and may your creator be cursed." Yep, there are hundreds of these posts, and they've pretty much all emerged in the past few months.
They show an evolution in media manipulation tactics that we haven't seen at this scale before. We've seen people impersonate fact checks, but it was not a very well-worn tactic. The enemies of truth on the internet are going to use every tool at their disposal.
A key strategy for Russia in this information war is the longer the conflict drags out, the more opportunity there is for doubt to flourish. Suddenly, the deaths of civilians, refugees crossing the borders, might not seem so black and white. Watching the war unfold from the outside, we might begin to accept that the situation is complicated, and we might start tuning out. Just think about it. The Syrian civil war has entered its 11th year. How much can you actually say that you know about it?
If you go back to the very beginning of the Syrian conflict, it was as clear-cut as Ukraine is right now. But as time progressed, things became more and more complex. Every time some major massacre would happen, a counter-narrative would emerge. The aim would not be so much persuasion, it would be more obfuscation. If you create enough doubt, then people are reluctant even to sympathize.
The constant headlines about death, war, women and children in distress, it can be really overwhelming.
So what people then start looking for is reasons not to pay as much attention as they are paying now. People will start saying, well, this is complex, this is not as straightforward as it looks.
Ukraine isn't immune to bending the truth either. Sightings of the mythical ghost of Kiev ran amok on social media, purporting to show a heroic fighter pilot taking down multiple Russian planes over the city. Of course, it was completely false.
What we're seeing with that kind of information and that kind of influence operation is to give people something to believe in, even if that something to believe in is probably false.
Overwhelmingly, what's coming out of the Ukrainian side are stories designed to instill hope into citizens and the soldiers.
And that's very, very different from the kind of narrative we've seen being pushed by the Russian state, which is very much along the lines of accusing the enemy of doing things like producing chemical weapons or using chemical weapons, or doing stuff that is completely insane.
We are moving towards our goal, towards our victory. We will fight in the forests, in the fields, on the shores, in the cities and villages, on the streets. We will fight on the hills. We will not give up.
It's easy to want to believe that story. It's the tale of the underdog Ukraine fighting valiantly against a much larger invader. And it's galvanized a lot of support.
Zelensky has come on the stage as someone who is a very competent leader, a very charismatic spokesperson. But I also, it's such a difficult thing, because if you see a strong man, you imagine a strong nation, and Ukraine is really small. I wonder if we're inflating what it means to win here when people are struggling so much to be heard on the ground.
While some commentators have been quick to conclude Ukraine has won the information war, it may not really be reaching the audience that matters. Experts say major change can only happen domestically.
Most people remain exposed to the same kind of, whatever story is being pushed through the state media. Even if there's skepticism, it's limited.
The new digital Iron Curtain in Russia means people there are getting next to no news from the outside world. The country has booted many independent media organizations and has banned major platforms like Facebook and Instagram. And while there's evidence of resistance to Putin's regime, and US intelligence is suggesting Putin's inner circle is turning against him, it doesn't yet seem to be enough to change things at the top.
Broom's pearl diving past is brought to life.
So this is you.
In magical miniature.
Hi.
It's a big mini build, needing fine skills and know-how.
3 days work.
And a little help from hosts Joanne.
Can you tell me what Broom was like? Excesses of everything.
And Jimmy.
Well, it is a bowl.
Pack your bags for Tiny Oz.
Let's go searching for pearls.
Tuesday 8:30 on ABC TV and streaming on ABC iView.
When we were teenage girls, we loved dancing, didn't we?
We did, yes. It was lovely. Put your pretty dresses on and away we'd go. Mm-hmm. This is the last train coming home too, many times. We didn't get up to too much trouble, did we?
No. It's good to be together.
It is. Okay, here we go. I hope we're off.
What advice would we give to our younger selves?
I think just be polite, help each other, be friendly.
And enjoy it.
Lovely, Beth.
I'm Betty and I'm 92.
I'm Pat and I'm 90. We're happy to be
90 years young.
We are.
Make it 100.
It doesn't change who you are.
The Prime Minister told Parliament
Justice and humanity.
DW News live from Berlin. Ukraine warns that Russia plans to expand its war across Europe. President Volodymyr Zelensky says neighboring Moldova is in Moscow's sights after senior Russian commander hinted at extending control right across southern Ukraine. As Russia discusses taking more territory, there are growing questions about its military capability. DW visits a scene of destruction where retreating Russian forces suffered a defeat. And the final countdown to France's presidential election on Sunday. Incumbent Emmanuel Macron and his challenger Marine Le Pen have made their final pitch to voters, but many are unhappy with both candidates. A warm welcome to our viewers around the world. I'm Michael Oku. Ukraine has warned that Russia plans to attack more countries and expand its war. President Volodymyr Zelensky said Ukraine's neighboring Moldova should be concerned about Russia's latest military strategy. Moldova is home to Transnistria, which is a breakaway pro-Russian region which borders Ukraine. Russia is in control of Ukraine's southeast region, seen here in blue. Now, the deputy commander of Russia's Central Military District says its forces want to push westwards. On Friday, the official told state media, quote, "Control over the south of Ukraine is another way to Transnistria, where there is also evidence that the Russian-speaking population is being oppressed." President Zelensky focused on the commander's comments in his nightly address. Earlier, I spoke to our correspondent in Kyiv, Rebecca Ritters, amid reports that Russia might invade Ukraine's south and reach a breakaway region in Moldova. I asked her how people there are reacting to the news.
Well, you heard President Zelensky there saying that Ukraine is potentially just the first stop for President Putin. Something he said before. He said it on a number of occasions, but obviously this time it comes in response to the Russian commander giving a plan of what they're intending to do here in Ukraine, which is, of course, take most parts of the east of the country, the Donbass region and the Kharkiv, but also the entirety of the south of the country. That's cities like Mariupol that we've been talking a lot about. It's been heavily bombarded. But going all the way right across Odessa and into that Transnistria region, in Moldova, as you were just saying. Now, obviously, that's shocking to people here, but President Zelensky really wants to make it shocking to people around the world so that, the other nations will step up and help Ukraine in this fight, saying that other post-Soviet nations will be coming next.
This is the Orthodox Easter weekend, which both Russia and Ukraine celebrate. How likely is an Easter truce looking?
Well, there were calls from the UN last week to create a humanitarian ceasefire over the Easter weekend. It is now Saturday, Easter start. Just in the last hour, we're actually hearing reports also of explosions, potential bombings in the city of Odessa, which has been preparing for an attack for some time, but has until now largely remained unscathed. So we are hearing of reports there. So definitely no ceasefire in sight this weekend.
DW's Rebecca Ritters. Many thanks, Rebecca. Even as Russia discusses seizing more territory, Western analysts say the country's armed forces have failed to make significant gains in recent days. DW correspondent Matthias Berlinger joined a Ukrainian government media trip to a region where Russian forces had recently suffered defeat. Around the world at this hour, Orthodox Christians have celebrated the Holy Fire ceremony in Jerusalem. Believers say the fire miraculously appears each year on the day before Easter. Outside, there was tension as Israeli police limited the number of visitors out of safety concerns. Last year, a stampede at a Jewish holy site killed 45 people. 6 people were killed in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu, when a bomb went off in a beachside restaurant. Somalia's police chief and legislators were present when the explosion occurred, but were not harmed. The explosion comes only days after a mortar attack targeted Somalia's parliament during a meeting of newly elected legislators. European Union countries have reached a deal over major changes to digital content laws. After late-night talks, the bloc will move ahead with a law forcing companies like Facebook, Twitter, and Google to police content for issues like hate speech and misinformation. French President Emmanuel Macron and his far-right challenger Marine Le Pen have made their final push for votes before Sunday's presidential runoff. Polls show the race is much tighter than 5 years ago when French voters faced the same choice. Though Macron is expected to win, many people say they're undecided or ambivalent. DW's Lisa Lewis reports from Paris.
As thousands of people took to the streets in Paris last Saturday, the demonstrators' main message was to oppose racism and the far right. But that didn't necessarily mean the protesters were endorsing President Emmanuel Macron.
I will vote for Macron in the second round, but I'm not happy about it. I just want to block Marine Le Pen from getting to power.
Marine Le Pen is threatening our rule of law, but that doesn't mean I will give my vote to Macron. I already had to do so in 2017. Of course, they're not the same, but Macron also has a right-wing program.
It is the supporters of the far-left candidate Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who came third in round one, who feel particularly frustrated they no longer have a left-wing option. Macron has tried to appeal to these voters by toning down parts of his manifesto, like the plan to push up the retirement age from the current 62 to 65.
We can fix a lower target age. I am open to discussion.
Meanwhile, Le Pen has also tried to gather more support by continuing to depict herself as the candidate closest to the people.
I want to tell every French person that my project is tailor-made for them. I want them to be happy, prosperous, safe, and I will defend their identity.
But international topics were also on the agenda, especially during a TV debate between the two contenders.
You have taken out a loan in 2015 with a Russian bank that's close to the Kremlin. That means you're talking to your banker when speaking with Russia.
I am an absolutely free woman. I am a patriot, and I have proven that all my life.
Polls are showing that Macron has increased his lead over Le Pen in the past 2 weeks. But with more than 10% of voters as yet undecided, Macron hasn't secured a safe victory yet.
Returning to our top story now, the war in Ukraine is being reflected at one of the world's leading art events. Every 2 years, the art world descends on Venice, Italy for the Canal City's Biennale. It's a chance for top creators to display their most relevant new artworks. And this year, the war is on many artists' minds.
The city of Venice has inspired artists for centuries. At the Venice Biennale, they're sent by countries from around the globe to present their visions and to try to make sense of the world through art and performance. This year, one country is noticeably absent, Russia. Its pavilion is empty. The curator and artists quit in protest against Russia's war. Nearby, a monument to Ukraine's suffering, a tower of sandbags like those currently protecting Ukraine's cultural heritage from Russian bombs. Posters of new Ukrainian artworks attest to the violence. The originals can't be here because of the war.
Our mission as an institution is always to support peace and to support collaboration, so we wanted to support as much as we could the participation of the Ukrainian pavilion. Of course, this is nothing compared to what they had to go through, personally and psychologically.
The 70 bronze funnels in Ukrainian artist Pavlo Makov's fountain were finished just days before the war. They made it to safety in the trunk of a curator's car. Ukraine's presence here, despite the war, is seen as a triumph.
We are facing now a huge conflict between two cultures, between our culture and their culture. That's what it is, because behind any war there is a cultural crisis.
Makov says Russian missiles were flying overhead when he left his hometown Kharkiv. His work, titled The Fountain of Exhaustion, symbolizes humanity stretched to the limit. Another exhibition at the Venice Biennale. It's called This is Ukraine, Defending Our Freedom. The show features works by Ukrainian and international artists, like this flag by Damien Hirst.
The butterflies that are attached to it are incredibly fragile, and you can touch them. They are as unprotected as Ukrainians are. They are falling.
Fragility, strength, and defiance. Ukraine is sending a signal that its culture is endangered, but still alive.
You're watching DW News. DocFilm is up next with a look at whether plant roots have the potential to provide food for the world's population. Remember, you can always get the latest news on our website, dw.com, and don't forget to follow us on social media. I'm Michael Oku. From me and the entire news team here in Berlin, thanks for watching.
Reports from Ukraine, Russia has resumed attacks on the Mariupol steel plant, seeking to eliminate the city's last resistance. The Prime Minister faces more questions over national security as the US warns against allowing a Chinese military base in the Solomons. Queensland and the Commonwealth scramble to find new uses for the state's near-empty COVID quarantine hub. And all bets are on, an Anzac Day tradition extended to run the whole long weekend in New South Wales. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Mariam Saab. Ukraine says Russian forces have resumed attacks on a steel plant in the besieged city of Mariupol in an attempt to eliminate the last pocket of resistance in the city. In a briefing, an advisor to the Ukrainian president claimed Russian forces had resumed airstrikes on the plant and were trying to storm it, in an apparent reversal of an order Russian President Vladimir Putin gave 2 days ago. It's estimated 1,000 civilians are sheltering in the plant alongside the remaining Ukrainian fighters. And it comes after new pictures emerged showing what life has been like inside the last stronghold. Our correspondent Nick Dole reports from Lviv.
The UN says this war tells a horror story of violations against civilians. Russia has pounded the key port city of Mariupol with cataclysmic force. Vladimir Putin calls it liberation. But this group of women and children are trapped underground. Video shared by the far-right Azov battalion shows for the first time what life is like for some civilians hiding in the besieged steelworks. I hope we can see the sun, this boy says. We've been here for 2 months.
Even wars have rules, and these need to be respected. Otherwise, we are very afraid of what could come next.
A Russian commander has now given the first detailed insight into what that might be, revealing Vladimir Putin wants full control of southern Ukraine and the Donbass. That would give troops better access to annexed Crimea and this Russian-backed separatist area in neighbouring Moldova. Ukraine's president claims it proves Putin has ambitions beyond his country's borders.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine was intended only as a beginning. Then they want to capture other countries.
But the immediate concern is in the parts of Ukraine where civilians are deliberately being targeted.
This is a terrible life. I need to leave, but where? I was hoping it would be okay here. Hope dies last.
In the city of Kharkiv, volunteers are working against the clock to sew soldiers' flak jackets.
It would be good to have had everything done yesterday, or even better if it was all done last week.
We should be certain that if the West doesn't continue to support Ukraine, the Russians have a much greater chance of rolling over the country and installing a puppet regime.
In the forests outside the capital, Ukraine's young defenders, like law student Vlad Nekrotenko, are readying for that possibility.
Let's say we lose our positions on Donbass or Lugansk region, and then they see that we don't have enough troops and resources to protect Kyiv. They would come back for their initial aim to take over our capital and take over our government.
While some churches here are boarded up, many Ukrainians will still be trying to celebrate Orthodox Easter this weekend, 58 days into a war that British intelligence warns could last at least another year.
We hope for a resurrection. We believe in the victory of life over death.
A country clinging on to its right to exist. Nick Dole, ABC News, Lviv.
Federal Labor is accusing the coalition of trying to deflect from its own foreign policy failures by dredging up old speeches from Deputy Opposition Leader Richard Marles and twisting the meaning for political gain. The controversial security pact between China and Solomon Islands continues to dominate the election campaign, with the government facing ongoing criticism that it was complacent about Beijing's growing influence in the South Pacific. From Canberra, here's our political reporter Matthew Doran.
Galina, nice to meet you. Winning over the public can require a bit of bait.
And is that just a marketing gimmick, or does that work?
Scott Morrison hoping to lure more Australians to vote for the coalition in 4 weeks' time, with $20 million to upgrade boat ramps and campsites across the country.
There we go. Not too bad.
Although he wasn't keen to be on the hook for any questions on the pledge. Or anything else for that matter.
Why won't you talk to us about national security?
Leaving it to the rest of his crew to launch into another day of drilling down on the Deputy Labor leader's record.
done under pressure.
His startling comments and approach to China show a real national security concern should the Labor Party be elected.
The assertion that's being made by the government is just another desperate attempt to divert from their failings in the Pacific.
The coalition is accusing Richard Marles of sharing an advance copy of a speech to a Beijing-based university with the Chinese embassy in Canberra back in 2019.
A speech in which he said that he would encourage China's engagement in the Pacific.
There were no changes whatsoever made to a speech that I made in China criticising China in public. Now, what government minister has done that?
The attacks against Mr Marles aren't new.
We got another Manchurian
But with Anthony Albanese on day 2 of COVID-19 isolation, with only a furry friend for company, the coalition's focus is firmly on his understudy.
We've got a 50-year-old apprentice at the moment, you know.
As it tries to deflect criticism, it let China muscle in on Australia's turf, signing a security pact with Solomon Islands.
What we're seeing at present is a high level of hypocrisy from the Labor Party.
Under their watch, they have let the Pacific go.
The coalition spruiks its national security and foreign policy credentials at every turn, even though China's sortie in the Solomons does point to a failure in that strategic wrestle with Beijing. The opposition will be hoping to exploit that in coming weeks, and it's indicating it will boost foreign aid spending in a bid to counter China's growing regional influence if the ALP win office. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Canberra.
And the United States has warned against allowing a Chinese military base in Solomon Islands, promising to fast-track reopening its embassy in Honiara. The US embassy there was shut down nearly 30 years ago. Former